My brother asked me for $12,000 and told me he needed it to keep his house. I trusted him, and I gave it to him. A few months later, I saw a brand new truck sitting in his driveway. When I asked him about it, his answer didn't make sense. But the truck wasn't the part that bothered me most. What I found out about the money was bad enough. Then I found out my wife had known the truth the whole time. The first time I saw my brother's new truck, I actually smiled. It was parked outside his house, still clean enough that the tires looked like they'd barely seen a muddy job site. Mike came out and waved. New truck? He grinned. Yeah, finally had to do it. I looked at it again. It was a nice truck, newer than anything I'd ever seen him drive. And then I remembered the $12,000 I'd given him a few months earlier. Money he told me he needed to keep his house. I looked at the truck again. Something didn't add up. My name's David. I'm 61 years old. I'm a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing plant, and I'd been married to Karen 31 years when this happened. Mike's my younger brother. He's 57 and runs a small landscaping business. We've never been the kind of brothers who talked every day, but we were close enough. If his mower broke, I'd help him fix it. If I needed something moved, he'd show up with his trailer. That was how our family worked. So when Mike called me one Tuesday evening and said he was in trouble, I didn't think much about helping. He was sitting in his truck when he called. I hate asking you this. How bad? He was quiet a second. I'm behind on the mortgage. I was sitting at the kitchen table. Karen was at the sink putting dishes away. Mike told me business had been slow. A couple customers hadn't paid him. Then one of his trucks needed repairs. He said he'd fallen behind on the house and the bank was starting to call. How much? 12. I leaned back in my chair. $12,000 was a lot of money to me. Wasn't sitting in some account I never looked at. It was savings Karen and I had built over years. I told Mike I'd think about it. When I hung up, Karen dried her hands and looked over. What did he want? I told her. She was quiet a moment. Can we help him? I don't know. She leaned against the counter. If he loses the house. She didn't finish. Didn't have to. A couple days later, we talked about it again. I finally transferred the money. Mike came over to pick up the paperwork. He looked embarrassed. I'll pay you back. I know. I mean it. I know. I put the folder on the table. I don't need it back tomorrow. Just get yourself straightened out. He nodded. Karen was standing near the counter. She looked at him. You're doing the right thing, she said. At the time, I believed her. For the next few months, I didn't bring up the money. Figured Mike was trying to get his business back on its feet. Then I saw the truck. I walked around it once. That's pretty nice. Mike laughed. Yeah, I needed something reliable. New? Yeah, I looked through the window. Lease? No, bought it. That got my attention. You bought it? Yeah. He rubbed the back of his neck, put some money down. I looked at him. How much? He shrugged. Enough. I laughed a little. What does that mean? I don't know. A few grand. A few? Something like that. He changed the subject. I didn't push him. Not right there. But driving home, I kept thinking about it. A few $1,000s was a lot closer to $12,000 than I was comfortable with. A couple days later, I asked Karen about him. She was standing at the kitchen counter cutting vegetables. Did Mike get caught up on the mortgage? Her knife stopped for half a second. I think so. I looked at her. You think so? That's what he told me. I nodded. Okay. She went back to cutting. I stayed where I was. How do you not know? She put the knife down. David, I don't know every detail of his finances. Neither do I. She picked the knife back up. Then there you go. It was a normal answer. At least it sounded normal. But something about it stuck with me. A few days later, I ran into an old friend of Mike's at a diner. His name was Steve. He'd worked with Mike for years before they went their separate ways. We were talking about work when Mike came up. Steve shook his head. "That guy's been under some pressure." "Yeah," I said. "He told me things were rough." Steve took a drink of coffee. "He finally got caught up with those supplier bills, though." I looked at him. "What supplier bills?" Steve looked at me. "Mike didn't tell you?" "Tell me what?" He hesitated. "Nothing. I mean, he had some money problems, owed a few suppliers." "How much?" Steve shrugged. "I don't know. 10, 12 grand maybe?" I didn't say anything, just looked down at my coffee. 10 or 12,000. On the drive home, I kept doing the math. 12,000, the same amount I'd given Mike. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the truck a minute before going inside. I opened my bank records. There it was, the transfer, $12,000. I stared at it. Then I closed the laptop. One conversation wasn't enough for me to accuse my brother of lying. So I called him the next morning. "How's the house?" He was quiet. "Fine." "You caught up?" "Yeah, good." There was a pause. Then I asked, "How's the truck?" He laughed. "It's good." I leaned back in my chair. "Mike." "Yeah? Where'd the money I gave you go?" Silence. Wasn't long. Maybe 3 seconds. But it was long enough. It went where it needed to go. "That's not what I asked." He sighed. "I had some other stuff going on." "What other stuff?" "Business." "And the truck?" Another pause. I put money down on it. I closed my eyes. "How much?" "I don't remember." "Mike, David, how much?" He finally told me. Wasn't the whole 12,000, but it was enough. Enough for me to know the mortgage story wasn't true. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table a while. Karen walked in a few minutes later. She looked at me. "What happened?" I looked up. "Mike used the money for his business and the truck." She didn't answer. I watched her face. Then I said, "You knew." She looked down. "David, you knew before I gave it to him." She sat across from me. "Mike talked to me." "When?" "Before you transferred the money. And he told you the mortgage wasn't the problem." She nodded. I waited. She rubbed her hands together. He was embarrassed. That's not an answer. He was scared you wouldn't help him. I stared at her. Maybe I wouldn't have. I know. She said it quiet. That bothered me more than I expected. You knew I might say no. Yes. And you still let me give him $12,000 based on a story that wasn't true. She looked at me. I thought you'd want to help him if you understood how bad things were. I shook my head. You didn't get to decide that for me. She didn't argue. Neither did I. That evening, I went into the garage and sat on the workbench a while. I could hear the refrigerator humming through the open door. 31 years of marriage. And suddenly I was wondering how many times the three of us had talked about something without me knowing the whole story. Not just about money. That was the part that bothered me. The money could be repaid. The decision couldn't be undone. I called Mike. Come over tomorrow. Next evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table. Karen wasn't there. I put the bank statement between us. You should have told me. I know. You could have just told me the truth. Mike rubbed his forehead. I was ashamed. I understand being ashamed. He looked at me. I was trying to keep the business alive. I understand that too. He nodded. I was going to pay you back. I believe you. He looked surprised. I kept going. But that's not the part I can get past. He didn't say anything. I tapped the bank statement with one finger. You asked me for money for one reason. Turned out you needed it for something else. I know. And Karen knew. He looked toward the floor. Yeah. I took a breath. We're putting a repayment schedule in writing. He nodded. Okay. And I'm not lending you money again unless I know exactly what it's for. He looked at me. Fair. I almost laughed. Fair. After 30 years of being brothers, we'd boiled it down to a business agreement. But maybe that was what we needed. Mike made the first payment a few weeks later. Then another. He wasn't trying to disappear. He'd made a bad decision. He'd lied because he was embarrassed. And Karen had helped him keep the lie going because she figured she was protecting him. None of that made it okay. Karen and I talked about it more than once. We didn't scream at each other. No dramatic scenes. But there were some long silences. One night, I asked her, "Why didn't you just tell me?" She looked down at the table. "I thought you'd be angry." "I was going to be angry anyway." "I know." I shook my head. I could have handled the truth. She didn't answer. The marriage didn't fall apart over $12,000. But something changed. From then on, we stopped assuming family problems were something one person could quietly handle for everybody else. If somebody needed help, we talked about it. If we disagreed, we said so. And if the answer was no, it was no. I also moved some of our savings into accounts that needed both of us to know what was happening before money got moved. Didn't do it to punish Karen. Just didn't want important financial decisions being made around me anymore. Took some getting used to. Months later, I was in the garage going through paperwork when another repayment check from Mike was sitting on my workbench. Karen walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to me. "Another payment?" "Yeah." She looked at the check. "He's keeping up, so far." She nodded. Neither of us said much after that. Through the open garage door, I saw Mike's truck pass at the end of the street. For a second, I watched it disappear around the corner. Didn't wave. Didn't get angry. Just closed the drawer where I kept the repayment records. Then I picked up my coffee. Mike and I still talk. Isn't exactly the same. Maybe it shouldn't be. Some things in a family can be repaired. But you don't repair them by pretending nothing happened. You repair them by deciding what the rules are gonna be from then on.